This is Chef Mark with Appliance Factory Fine Lines. Today I got a special treat. I'm going to show you guys how to clean a whole beef tenderloin. Alright, I've got my knife good and sharp. I prefer a boning knife that's flexible for this job. Let's get to work. So the first thing I'm going to do is identify the two sides of a standard beef tenderloin. There's the tail, which is the smaller part, and then the head. And the head has another muscle hanging off of it, and this is known as the bull nose. And all of this is completely edible, but you can see it's covered in the silver skin. And a lot of times this silver skin just comes off really easily. So the first thing I do is I just go through and I remove the big globules of fat. A lot of times I can just reach in there with my fingers and just pull some of this out. But none of this is edible. You really want to make sure that you remove all of this, because if you leave any of that on when you cook, let's say your steak, it's just going to tighten up, really pull together, and make your meat less tender. There's a piece of the tenderloin here. It's known as the chain, and it's kind of held on by just a little bit of connective fat. You can see here I can almost just pull it off with my fingers. And the chain, it's completely edible. However, it really has a lot of sinew and tendon and kind of stuff that's going to make it tough to chew. Here it is. This is the chain. So what I typically do with the chain is on the side, on the bull nose, I can get a couple nice pieces of meat out of here that I might use for steak salad, beef tips. You see that a lot in restaurants. There's a couple more pieces out of this side that I can pull out. But the middle part, by the time I clean it out, there's very little to eat. So typically I roast that and I throw it in with my beef stock. The next thing I like to do is clean the back. So when I flip it over, you can see I have this fat here that's kind of feathery. And what I just do is take my knife and, working quickly, I almost shave off this excess fat. I don't have to get it all off, because unlike silver skin, this will render when it cooks. Now it's time to remove the silver skin. And the silver skin is this layer of fat and connective tissue that sits really close to the meat. And what I need to do here is equal and opposite tension. So what I'm going to do is dig my knife underneath and come through the other side. Then I'm going to do equal and opposite tension. I'm going to pull with my left hand and my right hand in opposite directions. I'm actually holding the knife slightly up. You can see here I have very little and hopefully no excess meat attached to that. And then I'm going to go equal and opposite tension in the opposite direction. So my left hand's going to go right, my right hand's going to go left. I'm going to cross under myself, and that's going to allow me to take off this silver skin with a minimal amount of the expensive beef stuck to that. And I'll show that to you once again. Equal and opposite tension. The first one is the hardest one. So what I'm going to do is poke my knife underneath, come back through. I'm going to pull opposite tension, and then opposite tension. And you want to take your time with this. You can see here how I look at the first one. And sometimes a little slight. So let's say I do something like loose, a piece I get back, you get it off. And here's a really important tip. When I'm using a paring knife, I only want to put pressure in one direction. So I'll show you what that means. I poke underneath. Now I'm only going to do pressure as I pull back, and then when I return my knife, no pressure, and then pull back. And then I can go forward too. So if I go forward, no pressure in this direction, forward, no pressure in that direction. So it looks like I'm sawing, but what I'm only doing is applying pressure in one direction, and that prevents me from getting a sawtooth look on my meat, and that's going to kind of give you ragged ends when you're cooking it. The last thing I need to do here is pull off the bull nose. It's actually separated by this line of connective tissue here. So if you try to cook this with that piece of connective tissue in there, it's going to be really tough. And I think for me this is the trickiest part, because there's no defined line. So what I try to do is work my knife down that line of connective tissue there. And unlike a chef knife where I'm holding with the pinch grip, with a boning knife I do want to put my finger on top. That locks up my wrists and gives me a lot more control when I'm using a boning knife. So just really small swipes here. Okay. And try to pull this out without cutting too much into the beef itself. And then to remove that muscle, it's kind of a little bit of an educated guess. I've been doing it long enough that I kind of know where it's at, like so. Right, and I have a little bit more silver skin here I want to remove. Now the bull nose, or this end of the steak, this is good stuff. You can sometimes get a full steak out of it, but oftentimes if you've been at a steakhouse and if you order your steak medium well done, it's coming off the bull side because it's slightly less tender than a center cut filet. And a center cut fillet might be, like a 6-ounce fillet would be about that big, and an 8-ounce fillet, it's pretty big, it's about yay big. And those take quite a while to cook because there's such little fat and such high density in this meat. And there you have it. That's just one way to break down a beef tenderloin. There's a lot more to know. When I'm cutting steaks, I will cut my medium well steaks typically out of the bull nose. If I'm cutting a center cut fillet, oftentimes a 6-ounce fillet would be about that thick. An 8-ounce fillet, it's pretty big, so you can see you can only get a few center cut fillets out of each tenderloin. And one of my favorite tricks is to take both ends, about 2 ounces each, back those up side by side, wrap that with bacon for the bacon wrapped twin fillet. That's one of my favorites. This is Chef Mark with Appliance Factory and Fine Lines.